Anyone walking up Whalley New Road in the Brookhouse area of Blackburn would be aware of a great length of high stone wall with a tall iron gate at one end. Over on the other side, a housing estate. However, many folks will remember the time when a well-known school occupied this site, namely Notre Convent. If we went back 20, 50 or even 100 years ago and took a stroll through the main gates, we would have seen a very different picture. As one passed through the gates, a long curving drive with a tall clipped hedge would be seen. Along the way on the left you would pass the boarders' playground, behind which was a large expansive building. On the right, behind a hedge, a large lawn area surrounded by footpaths and a wooden building used as a bicycle shed. Eventually the drive would open up to reveal the convent, the front door and parlour. There was a lawn in front of the house which was surrounded by mature trees. Entering the main gate from Whalley New Road, on the right was a lodge, and turning immediately left down Ivy Lane, the pupils would gain admission to the school entrance. As children, we would pick out one special edging stone down the lane, known as the wishing stone. It was a large, slate blue-coloured, pointed stone on which we would stand and make a wish. As the lane was lined by tall trees, there were fallen leaves in abundance during the autumn months, through which we used to enjoy shuffling. Today the main gate posts are still in place at one end of the wall, but the lodge has been replaced and is now a child care centre owned by the council. The inside area is sealed off with fencing in all directions. The community of Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur moved into this Brookhouse site in 1859, and almost immediately a building was started for a large boarding and day school, known to everyone as the convent. The building was completed in 1862. Over the years, more land was bought and the building was extended to accommodate increasing numbers. In 1864, more land was bought in order to extend the school, and a teacher's house was built to provide more accommodation. This later became a teacher's centre, providing extra tuition for girls hoping to qualify for teaching. Many of the boarding school pupils came from upper-class homes. The blue boarders were taught by different staff, had separate accommodation, and wore a blue uniform. They also had their own playground, which over the years retained its name, the Boarders' Playground. In the early 1900s, however, a number of girls known as the Green Boarders lived in the convent, but shared lessons with the day girls. The boarders came from all over the world: India, Spain, France, Belgium, Ireland, Scotland and Peru. The higher grade school at Notre Dame was opened in 1894 to provide more advanced education for local girls, similar to that provided at St Albans Boys. In the early 1900s, this would have been the view of the tradesman's entrance at Baswell, with the tram lines in evidence. Turning the clock back to 1989, this would have been the view from Whalley New Road, Baswell. The school building towering above the wall. The gates of the tradesman's entrance in the foreground, open wide to allow the pupils access, passing the red tennis court on the left and then turning right to enter the boot room. Outdoor shoes removed, replaced by indoor shoes. In the early 1900s, the science teacher at the time, Miss Bell, gave the girls a small garden to cultivate. These gardens were arranged in rows on the land. Passers-by thought the gardens were the sisters' graves. Over the years, this area became the red tennis court. Here, the front door of the convent, opening into a large hallway with the parlour on the left. Once the well-kept lawn in front of the house. St. Cecilia's door. A view of the gardens. Outside the chapel corridor. Here another pathway led to the school canteen, which opened in 1951. In former years, half of the playground was partitioned off by netball courts, the other half used for general play. The Sacred Heart statue used to have a canopy over and around it, and a large brass handbell was placed at the foot of the statue to be rung when playtime ended. During the Second World War years, the sisters kept poultry, as fresh eggs were highly prized at the time. Hens were reared in the far end of the playground, enclosed within a large netted area. Sister Elizabeth of St. Thomas was in charge. Here, a view from above the playground shows the enclosed grounds. One former pupil, Dorothy Whipple, a well-known authoress, who started at the convent in 1905, aged 12 years, tells us at this time, "The convent, with its enclosed garden, made a green isle in the sea of slate waves, over which rode the gigantic funnels of industry and the cotton mills." In her autobiography, called The Other Day, she described the convent thus: "Once the building had been a country mansion of an old Lancashire family, but little by little the tide of mills, streets, houses and shops crept over the fields and flowed around the house and far beyond." The view inside the front door. The Angel Square. Out of school hours, the building never felt empty, as it was a home for the sisters. If one passed the Angel Square, with its rich red floor tiles, one became conscious of a hushed aspect, with the vestibule to the sisters' quarters on one side and the chapel corridor on the other side. There was a warmth, a comfortable atmosphere, and sometimes one was aware of a faint smell of cooking. Further down the corridor was the music room, the refectory, stairs to the salle and other classrooms. In the corner, at the foot of the stairs, was a beautiful statue of Our Lady of Good Studies, the patron saint of all Notre Dame pupils. At the foot of the stairs, the needlework room, best remembered as Sister Mary Brendan's room, and later Sister Mary Immaculata took over. This is the salle in which senior assemblies took place and music lessons. It was originally the first chapel, built in 1880, which later became the salle when a new, larger chapel took its place. There was a gallery above, which housed a lady chapel, but this was later closed off. One of the original science laboratories. In 1957, there was another new building known as Lourdes, containing more science laboratories and cookery rooms as pupil numbers continued to increase. The cloakroom, boot room, up the stairs to the hall. To the left, the bottom corridor with classrooms. When I first went to school at the age of 4 years, I started in the kindergarten, Montessori 1, on the bottom red-tiled corridor. Sister Loretta and Sister Mary Alphonse were in charge of us, through to Montessori 4. In those days, a large mongrel dog we called Buddy wandered in and out of the lower school classrooms throughout the day, enjoying the fuss we children made of him. Boys also attended the kindergarten in those days, up to the age of 7 years. The hall, gym, library block was added in 1907 to accommodate the increasing numbers of pupils. The hall was used daily for junior assemblies and as a gym for PE lessons. An adjoining library was partitioned off, but when the whole school met on special occasions, the extra room was needed. The stage here is sealed off to provide an extra classroom when the school became a comprehensive. Sadly, the interior has lost its splendour and over recent years has become a shadow of its former self. To understand how the Blackburn convent and school came into being, we must step back into the 19th century. The Institute of the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur was founded by Julie Billiart in 1804. She was canonised in Rome in 1969 and is now Saint Julie. 6 pioneer sisters from Belgium first set foot on British soil on the 15th of November 1845 to establish the first Notre Dame convent and school in Penryn, Cornwall. The first 6 nuns found a nice detached house and were able to purchase it cheaply as people believed that it was haunted. However, they stayed there for only 3 years before moving to Clapham, London, where over the years the order grew to more than 700 sisters. Blackburn was the second English house to be founded. The first 4 sisters arrived in Blackburn at the request of Father Kay, the parish priest of St Albans Church, on the 3rd of July 1850, and they took up residence in a little house in Paradise Street, Blackburn. In 1850, the convent house in Paradise Street, pictured in this photograph, would have been found in a secluded area of Blackburn. The cottage houses in the same street were erected during the late 1700s, designed for the accommodation of the handloom weavers. In later years, the convent became St. Anne's Presbytery. Today, Paradise Street is no longer recognisable. It bounds the side of St. Anne's Roman Catholic Church, Blackburn, and doesn't even have a street sign anymore. An account written by the superior of the day said, "It was about 7 p.m. when we arrived in Blackburn. The crowd was so great that the omnibus could only advance with great difficulty. Through all the streets we passed, the windows were filled with people, anxious to catch a glimpse of us. To close the large gates through which we had to drive to the home took 6 strong men, so great was the crowd that tried to follow us in." In due course, the sisters opened St. Patrick's Ragged School on Penny Street for the children who could not afford the fees for St. Albans Parish School. Several years later, in 1859, the sisters left behind Paradise Street and took possession, we are told, of a picturesque homestead surrounded by gardens and meadows, sloping down to a running stream, which gave the name Brook House to the property. Sister Mary of St. Francis heard of the many needs of the struggling community in Blackburn and was permitted to send substantial financial help to enable them to purchase Brook House Lodge. The lodge was owned by William Kenworthy, a business partner at Brook House Mills with the Hornby family. He was a skilled and studious craftsman with several inventions in the cotton trade to his credit. He lived there for many years until his death in October 1856, leaving a wife and 2 young daughters. The 1861 census lists Mary Jane, age 9, and Annie Lizzie, age 7, Kenworthy's daughters, as scholars at the convent. Notre Dame will always remember 2 great and generous souls, Sister Mary of St. Francis and Sister Marie de Saint-Ange, both of whom, at different periods of the history of the Institute, devoted their lives, their energies and their personal fortunes to the special needs of the English province, and more particularly to the advancement of Catholic education in this country. Under their religious names were hidden names well known in high society England. These 2 sisters stand out in particular as prominent benefactresses. Sister Mary of St. Francis, the Honourable Laura Petrie, was the daughter of Lord Stafford and widow of the Honourable Edward Petrie, nephew of the 12th Duke of Norfolk. She entered the order in 1850, wanting to aid the poor by means of her fortune. Her memory will forever be revered and cherished in the Institute of Notre Dame. Another benefactress, Sister Marie de Saint-Ange, Mary Elizabeth Townley, was the first provincial of the English province of the Sisters of Notre Dame. Mary Elizabeth Townley belonged through her father John Townley of Townley Hall, Burnley, Lancashire, which traced its origins at least 1,000 years, holding a distinguished place in history. Its motto being Tenez le vrai, hold the truth. The pupils adopted the Townley family motto, Tenez le vrai, and this was incorporated into the school's song. Sister Mary was born on the 16th of November 1846 and started as a novice in Namur in 1872. Her parents and brother are buried in St Hubert's graveyard at Dunsop Bridge. In 1886, when Sister Mary of St Francis died, 15 convents of Notre Dame existed in England, nearly all of which had been founded by her. Soon after the death of Sister Mary of St Francis, Sister Mary was entrusted with the entire direction of the English province, which included arranging business matters, purchasing buildings and new foundations. Sister Mary was herself responsible for 8 more foundations, including 3 African missions. She was given permission to devote all of her inherited income to the needs of the English province, buildings, extensions, improvements to one or other of the convents. She carried out these works in secret and never let it be known from what source financial help was derived. She built the chapels attached to 9 convents and added secondary schools to a large number of existing houses, including Blackburn. The English province, which she had so efficiently governed for 36 years, from 1886 to her death 31st of March 1922, also included 68 elementary schools for the free education of the poor, taught by the Sisters of Notre Dame. One of the convent's treasures was surely the beautiful chapel. As we passed through the outer chapel doors into the long chapel corridor, there was an aura of calm. Silence was observed as we anticipated the haven of peace that awaited us. Originally, the chapel corridor had highly polished tiles, later to be replaced by terrazzo flooring. On the left-hand side in each niche was a pedestal with a statue standing about 6 feet in height. St. Thomas More and St. Roch with his dog come to mind. On the 1st of May 1897, the foundation stone of this new chapel was laid, and on the 26th of July 1898, the new chapel was opened by the Bishop of Salford and later consecrated in 1904. The altar was one of the last designed by Augustus Pugin. He created detailed and exact drawings of medieval Gothic architecture and decoration. He was a convert to Catholicism and had a fervent desire to express his faith through architecture. Success in this field brought Pugin a number of commissions, including Southwark Cathedral and St Chad's Cathedral, Birmingham. Pugin has been called the foremost British architect of the 19th century, so Notre Dame Blackburn was privileged to have a chapel designed by him. However, the original pinnacles and the 4 statues of the sanctuary, St Michael, Gabriel, Cecilia and St John of the Cross, were replaced after almost 60 years in April 1959, as it was felt that they had lost a little of their lustre. The altar took on a new look when 10 mosaic panels were placed at the back of the sanctuary, together with a deep band of mosaic in blue, ochre, grey and gold. A marble canopy was also positioned over the throne. At the back of the chapel, opposite the entrance, was St. Julie's shrine. The walls were rich in colour and storied symbolism from floor to ceiling. Every tiniest motif had its meaning and purpose and beauty, whether it be the pattern of the thorn-crowned heart in the Sacred Heart Chapel or Our Lady's monogram. The detail was quite extraordinary. Beautiful words of St. Bernard's hymn, Jesu Dulcis Memoria, were written upon scrolls amid cherub angels, against the background of a deep blue starry sky framing the sanctuary. Every Friday around 3:30 we attended chapel for benediction and on other special feast days. The choir of senior pupils excelled themselves singing in both Latin and English, conducted by Sister St. John. During my school years, Father Brown was the school chaplain. When the renovation was completed, the chapel looked resplendent with its colourful mosaic sanctuary and the floor covered in beautiful parquetry. The affection and loyalty for the chapel remained even when school days were over. Generations of past pupils associated with the school will always remember the chapel and speak of its beauty. The chapel was a fitting memorial to Sister Mary Cecilia, who was superior in Blackburn for many years, 1893 to 1914. The chapel was then said to be the most beautiful in the diocese. In 1925, a most memorable headmistress arrived in Blackburn, namely Sister Josephine of the Dolors. At this time, the school was only half the size it became. As year succeeded year, higher education became available to more and more pupils, and changes were made to cope with increasing numbers. Sister Josephine took these changes in her stride. Amalgamation of the boarding and day school took place, and as more space was required, it was necessary to turn dormitories into classrooms. Boarders were therefore no longer admitted. The school, however, retained its own individual character and unity, held together by Sister Josephine. Sister Josephine introduced the house system, Clitheroe, Salisbury and Ward, and soon after she arrived in Blackburn, the school song was composed. It was indicative of her character that she asked a former headmistress to write the words. Sister was also responsible for the school magazine, introduced in 1938, and the establishment of a thriving Old Girls Association. The first president, Mrs. Doothwaite, was the wife of the headmaster of St. Albans Higher Grade School. It was not long before a network of Notre Dame associations developed informally, from groups of old girls wishing to keep in touch with each other and with their school. Later, a federation of associations was formed, where each association became part of a national network of Notre Dame houses in the British province. In 1944, the boarding school was reluctantly closed, and the dormitories and other rooms converted into additional classrooms. In 1945, the grammar school was formed, with the amalgamation of the boarding and day schools having been awarded direct grant status. In 1950, to commemorate her retirement after 25 years in charge of the school, Sister Josephine was presented with the Papal Cross, the Pro Ecclesia et Pontifice. Everyone loves Sister Josephine. In her dealings with her pupils, Sister always showed a profound understanding of human nature and a deep abiding interest in the well-being of each pupil. To her, every child was an individual, and she knew everyone by name. From her arrival to her retirement, she was the mind and heart of the school. Besides the sisters, who along with lay staff taught in the school, a number of sisters went out in pairs every day, as they were responsible for the parish schools in the town. All will agree that magnificent work has been accomplished in all the parishes and schools of Blackburn and district, not only in educating the mind, but also for the spiritual and moral welfare of those children who had been placed in their care. Over the years there have been many sisters and lay teachers who have in their own way made a tremendous contribution to the Notre Dame school. Former pupils will remember Sister Aloysius, Sister Clare, Sister Dorothy, Sister Mary Brendan, who joined the staff in 1912. She will be remembered by several generations of old girls for neat hemming and clean fingernails. Sister Mary Laurentia, Sister Mary Philippa, Sister Mary Teresa, Sister St. John, and many others. Many former pupils will also remember Miss Lord. She started at the convent in 1914 as a child, later becoming head girl. After university, she returned to the convent in 1926 as a teacher. She taught geography, became senior mistress, and remained until her death in 1953. Other teachers, Miss Wren, Art, Miss Howarth, Miss Binks, PE, Miss McAvoy, English, Miss Fort, History, Mrs. Bentley, Music, Mrs. Edwards, Biology, and a former mayoress of Blackburn, not forgetting Miss Tucker, French, who taught at the school from 1937 to 1975, and during this period produced several plays. Each pupil will have their own memories of the sisters and staff, depending on the years spent in school. September 1978. The school changed from a direct grant grammar school for girls to a mixed comprehensive. Boys were admitted to the school for the first time. 9 years later, a special school mass was held in the chapel on the 3rd of July 1987 for former pupils, which marked the end of Notre Dame education in the town. The school later amalgamated with John Rigby High School to create Our Lady and St John High School. An advert offering the site for sale appeared on the 27th of July 1989, and the demolition work started early in 1990. For all associated with Notre Dame, it was a sad time to watch the convent and school being demolished. The building, which had been a home to so many, was now finally abandoned. Through the trees, with the roof gone, the front of the convent boarded up, no longer a welcoming sight. The chapel corridor, with the roof removed. Each day, more of the building fell to the ground. To see the chapel in this state was upsetting, but inevitable. Fortunately, the altar, Stations of the Cross, the organ, benches, even the chapel doors, were all found new homes in local parishes. With the roof gone, open to the elements, the floor covered in water. The previous well-cut lawns were now overgrown. The statue of Our Lady weathered and neglected. The heavy machines turning the original structures into piles of rubble. Sadly, an era was fast disappearing into a pile of rubble, and the only remaining part of Blackburn Notre Dame School and Convent would be the land on which it was built. Following a series of amendments to numbers and design of housing over a 2-year period, Barrett's, the builders, decided to extend the adjoining Woodlands development and build a number of townhouses, retaining the trees and landscaping which fringed the convent. Today, the surrounding area is very different. Across the road, opposite the main gates, East Lancs Coach Builders has gone, along with St Michael and All Angels Church. All that remains is wasteland, sectioned off by wire fencing. The land scheduled for redevelopment. Across the road from the tradesman's entrance, which has since been filled in, was a footbridge over the River Blakewater, which is no longer accessible. Apparently the bridge fell in and was removed. Over the bridge at the left-hand corner of the street was the former Begley's confectioner's shop. It was later used for many years as our canteen. Packed lunches upstairs, cooked meals downstairs. The property has now been replaced by new housing development. Further up Whalley New Road, in the Baswell area, familiar shops have vanished and are now replaced by numerous takeaways and convenience stores. The lodge has been replaced by a gatehouse. The lodge was once used by Sister Mary Brendan, who taught domestic science, home economics. The building acted as a model home, and the senior girls had lessons on how to perform household duties. Later, Mr. John Billington lived at the lodge in his retirement years. He will be remembered by former pupils as the handyman caretaker who worked at the school for over 40 years. Just to the left of the main gates was a passage linking Whalley New Road with Whalley Old Road, with bollards at each end. This was known as the cinder pad. Today, this is much the same, providing a shortcut for pedestrians. In the Brookhouse area, high-rise flats are in evidence, along with modern housing in place of the maze of former streets and shops. St Albans Church remains as a landmark and helps one identify with the past. At the junction of Whalley New Road and Whalley Old Road, there is now a mini roundabout to ease traffic congestion. The streets have vanished, replaced by more high-rise flats. This photo shows how Lark Hill would have looked in 1913. In the late 19th century and early 20th century, the Brookhouse and Lark Hill districts would have looked so different from that of today. Originally, a tram would take you from the centre of Blackburn up Penny Street, stopping at Regent Street, passing Lark Hill, the toll bar, and then arriving at the convent opposite the main gates, a distance of approximately 3/4 of a mile. The tram was replaced by a bus around 1949. However, most pupils walked to and from school, and streams of girls wearing the familiar green school uniform would be seen shortly after 4 p.m. on their way home from school. I remember on one occasion Sister Mary Brendan and Sister St James standing inside the main gates at the end of Ivy Lane to check that each girl was wearing her gloves. On Whalley Old Road, the long convent wall is still in place, opening up to new housing development away from the main road junction. I wonder if the people who live there now, in Notre Gardens, are aware of the rich past. After 131 years, 1859 to 1990, the convent and school are gone. All that remains is the land on which it was built. In the words of the late Archbishop Goodyear, the world will move on and forget, but what a history. On Wednesday, the 31st of May 1995, the 150th Jubilee celebration of the First Sisters of Notre Dame arriving in Britain took place at Holy Souls Church, Warley New Road, Blackburn. There was a packed church of former pupils, staff and sisters, many coming from a distance. At the end of Mass, the school song was sung with great emotion for the final time. Memories of the happy years spent at Blackburn Notre Convent will never fade from the minds of those who were privileged to receive their education from this much loved school. Vivat Notre Dame.